Thank you, everybody, for joining. Uh, my name is Dave Arnold. I'm one of the senior support people here at Workamajig. Today's topic is about kind of the agency workflows to start up a project. Okay, there's a number of ways to get that done. Um, so I'm going to kind of run through each of those. Obviously, every agency is a little different. And so again, the basic would be, again, account manager says, I need to start up a project, right? Pretty simple, right? All you're going to do is, hit the plus icon somewhere. You're going to see the ability to see, a new project and go ahead and, fill in the client, give it a name and start from there. Okay. Again, very basic. And again, just let you know, I'm not going to go to the ins and outs of where to, what template to pick and all that stuff. This is more about that workflow. Who's in control of what step? Okay. So again, at its base, usually who adds that project in? Again, typically it's an account manager, maybe a project manager in your team. But again, a very simple method is just, hey, I need a project. I start the project. Okay. Now we have another way that we can do this, which is maybe you have a sales team that's part of this. Okay. And so from the sales team, again, they would typically start out in the sales process. They're going to create an opportunity. Um, they have a new lead, right? They process, they qualify that lead. Yes, this is a client that we could potentially work with. They've told us that they need some, this is Bill's new car wash. And so again, they need this new advertising bit for them. So they're going to start up an opportunity. Okay. In this opportunity, they're kind of tracking that sales process, right? How much is it for? What are the, who's our competitors? All those things involved in that sales process. One of the things that we can do with this is as it's moving through the sales process, they may finally say, hey, can you give me a pricing? Okay. Now, to work on that pricing, it's typical that you're going to probably come up with some comps, right? And so part of that is we can actually enable advanced features right on this. So who is it that would enable this advanced feature? And that advanced feature is we're going to be able to create an opportunity project or an opportunity campaign that will allow me to then set all of that production type effort in there, get a pricing on it, and then provide that pricing to the client. And then if it's a go ahead, we can then convert these into real projects or a real campaign. If your company also works more of blocks of time for that client, we also have the idea of a planning project where you can say, we're going to give you 20 hours a month for copywriting, 20 hours a month on HTML program, whatever that is. And we can set that up as a planning project. But the concept is the same. So to begin with, I'm just going to say, I need a project. Now, again, I'm working on maybe websites or collateral pieces or something like that. So that's where I may, just because of the name, I would create a campaign, but maybe I'm going to do this template. So again, who is it that's going to do this bit? Again, that's the decision. So again, sometimes this is the salesperson saying this, or it's a communication to that PM or AE to say, hey, I have this opportunity, it's moving forward, and they can send a note out via a conversation, they can link back in, and then that person can go ahead and make the decision, is this a project and campaign? Make sense? Right. So then I'm just going to keep it really simple. I need a collateral piece. I may even have a certain team that I'm going to work with, right? And again, the project status, again, usually it's going to be, I'm in a sales op because I'm tracking it through that. And then I go ahead and save that. And that's created that project for me. So again, it starts out being at the estimate. We're going to talk about estimates in just a bit, but the idea is that I now have this project sitting out here for my project manager or account manager to then work on the schedule, the timing of the schedule, because I had in that opportunity, when do I expect this to close? And so the schedule will cascade from there. I can start to assign services, probably not the people, unless I have something in here that may be to develop comps then in that case, I may actually assign people, hey, I need some comps developed for this, put that time in, it's assignment. This acts as Opti 71 acts just like a normal project. It's in traffic. I can assign people. They can put time towards it. I can put expenses towards it, right? So again, it's just a way for you to kind of get that all together, working with your sales team, price it correctly. And then if it converts, that's when we can come back to the opportunity and say, make the project live. So that's going to basically give it a project number and we move forward as the project. Okay, I'll come back to this one again in just a second because we haven't talked about estimate routing, and we'll talk about estimate routing in a second. Okay, so does that make sense? So again, we're just trying to get this as a process for your salespeople to talk to your project managers in order to give a better pricing to that new client or old client, right? Again, we don't have to have an opportunity just for new clients. It can be, new business with old clients. But again, get that pricing a little more dialed in, maybe even the timing, because again, if I start to slot out assignments, not to people, but just to services, that will actually show up in traffic. So I can kind of slot it out into our normal production. Hey, if you start 2 weeks later, we can get it done faster. Hey, we're booked out for a long time. Make sense? Okay. All right. So our next one uh, would be maybe a little more for internal, but again, there is another process to kind of arrive at that, hey, I need a project. Okay. So again, this opportunity was sales, kind of talking to your production people or your project managers, account managers. That's this opportunity and how we can feed information back and forth through that. Okay. The next thing we have is actually what we call a project request form. So the idea of a project request form is, again, could be a salesperson, could be an account manager. This could be just a simple, hey, I need something, right? So maybe whoever's doing that. So we have the concept of a project request. And so this is basically saying, hey, I need something. And again, you define this, and I'll show you that in just a second. But the idea is like, hey, I had a client, they asked for a website. I have a client that's just a general project request. But what is this doing? It's basically allowing somebody in your organization, okay, to say, hey, I need a project for this particular client. It's going to be, I'm picking my client. I'm putting in the project name, a little bit of a description, right? So here, let me go ahead and just quickly do that. And so then I put in a project name. Again, sorry, I'm just going blah, 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 and saying next. Okay. And this next is me actually filling out spec sheets. Okay. What is it? Right. So I have my create a brief. Give me a bunch of information that I'm asking for. When's it due? If it's a collateral piece, what are the sizes of it? Do I need captions in it? Again, all of that information, whatever you're trying to gather in order to start up the project. Okay. And then again, if I have another spec sheet that needs to be filled out, there's the other spec sheet, right? So again, give me more information as to what you're requesting. And then at the tail end of this is obviously I turn it in and it goes through an approval process. Okay. So now I'm going to step back a little bit and I'm going to go into that more setup style. And here we go. So again, you're defining what are my project requests and what does that make it up? So again, I have this, I need a website, and that's what we were looking at. So in the spec sheets, these were the spec sheets that were involved. So I can add as many spec sheets as I need, right? So again, they're answering the questions that I need to in order to start the project. Okay. The other is the approval process. So I have this where, again, it usually goes to a person. So this approval process, I can have a couple of steps or whatever. Again, I'm deciding who in this is going to be a notify, who's going to be actually the approvers. And again, if I go to here, you can see that the approvers tend to be, a person, if that makes sense. I want this to go to a particular person. And there we go, right? And then if I notify them, again, who gets notified? So again, it's just, this one is more along the lines of a centralized approver, okay? So who would be using these project request forms? right? Again, at the tail end of this approval, I get that ability to create a project. So once approved, and I'll show you that here. Sorry if I'm jumping a little bit. So I have a project request. It comes to whoever was designated as the approver, and I can come in and I can say, go ahead and approve it. I hope I only have one person on that. So the last person that's the approver will get this ability to create the project. Okay. So when I create the project, again, what am I going to create? A project? Am I going to create a campaign? I may know some other things, or I may know a planning project. Okay. So I'm going to, just because somebody asked, can I have a planning project? And so I'm just going, just because, to show what that does is I can say a planning project, all that information that I gathered is already filled in, right? If I had custom fields to fill out and whatnot, due date. Okay. Just like that. Start. Oh, okay. My due dates were kind of off there. Okay, I'll do that. Okay, so this is a planning project as opposed to a normal project. The difference is the schedule and the estimate are kind of the same thing, because in this one, you're just saying, okay, I need a particular service and I need, 50 hours. And that will go ahead and spread those 50 hours across the course of your project. Okay. The project timing. So I said it until October 13th, right? That's the due date. So you can see that it split those hours across. I can always jump in and edit those, and I can assign that work to different people. And there's also the ability to create a project, a separate project, and kind of tie it to this as well. But again, this is not that discussion. It's just more, how do I create them and what is it to? Okay. All right. So does that make sense? As far as, again, I get this request form, right? It's sent in for approval. Once it's approved, I can convert it into a project. Now, again, who would be using this? We see this often with internal marketing groups, right? With marketing groups that they, their clients are their people. Right? That makes sense, right? So again, they just need to say, I need something. And so this is a way for them to do that. And so that's through the client portal. They can log in and say, I need a new project. That makes sense. And they can select it and they can send it in and submit it. But a normal agency could also do this as well, right? It doesn't always have to come through the sales. Maybe they're sending an email to their account manager and saying, "Hey, I need a new website. Can you send me a quote?" But they could also potentially log in to Workamajig if you allow that, and they would have access to create their own project request. Okay. So again, that's another way, a different workflow. It can go, the client can log in, create the project request, and you control that. And then that can go in and then you can develop what you want and then bring it back. If that's be an opportunity, again, that may be something that your team decides to do. All right. So let's kind of stop on the project request part here. See if we had some questions on that. Let's see. Okay. As far as the project request fields, okay, so the creative brief, it's all coming from the spec sheets. So the creative brief would be the spec sheet that I'm adding. I'm just picking it for this. As far as for the first spot, when I said I need a project request, right, new, and I pick which request I want, there is a way to have these custom fields already in here. And that is actually, yes, can I do that? Here. So I basically can set up whatever fields I want here and add them into that request form. And those would just be the questions that get asked prior to going on to the next screen, which would give me the creative briefs and printing specs. Okay. So yeah, all of this is pretty customizable. Again, if I go back to the spec sheets, again, you guys are the ones who are developing these out, whatever questions you want. Again, those are going to be there. Is it a drop-down list? Is it a radio button? Is it just a text field? Again, those are things that you're controlling. And then what is the question and what's the order? The only thing we don't have is kind of a layout. The layout is top to bottom. We may be able to put tabs in there, but for the most part, first question is the top, last question is the bottom. And it's just going through that way. Okay. But again, if you have further questions, you can send in a note to support at Workamajig, and we'd be happy to show all that for you. Okay. All right. So that has really described my, the kind of the three processes of getting a project into the system. Now, again, what is your guys' workflow? So again, account manager, do they need anybody to say anything? Well, then all they need to do is hit the plus, right? You like things to come through sales? Okay, use the opportunity. Have the project manager, do that conversion into into an Opti project or an Opti campaign. And then they're working through that and they're kind of tag teaming that sales effort. Okay. Maybe for old clients, new business, maybe we just simply need a new project request. So again, hey, he says, hey, I know they said they needed a website. So I'm going to go ahead and click on project request. I need a new website. Who's it for? And that goes through a defined process. Make sense? Okay. So again, part of your guys is who should be in charge of each of those, right? Who would be the one who converts it? Okay. And that's what I'm just asking those questions so you can ask your guys, your team, how do we want to do this workflow? But there may be an easy way for you to get through, okay, to start up your projects. And again, maybe it's when I do this creative brief, right? I'm filling that information out. That's all being transferred over. So the idea is I'm filling it out once. When I convert it, it's all there too, right? So again, I'm not having to retype things in. Okay. Now, as far as in my project request, can I have multiple spec sheets? Absolutely. We saw that where, again, on this website one, I actually have two different spec sheets. If in the end I feel that I need a third one, again, I can just pick that up and, I need photo specs on this one. Okay. And so I put in photo specs as a default. Okay. When I'm coming into the request form under the approval, so here I have my project request and I open up that project request, this one doesn't have any. And I realize that, oh, I need a publication spec. And so I can go ahead and add that in and then start to fill it out. Okay. Make sense? And then again, if I'm working through project request, I'm defining who's going to approve it, and that can be multiple steps into that. I send it to the first person. That when that person approves, it goes to a second person. When that person approves, it goes to a third person, right? Whatever that workflow is for you, again, you can set that up. On the fly, I can add in more steps if I need to. So it's already with me and I'm reviewing it, so I can't edit that. But what can I do? I can add in, I need this to go to somebody else, right? Next in line, right? Go ahead and save that. And then go ahead and put a new approver and whatnot, put the new approver or approvers in. And again, then when I'm done with it, it'll go to the next person. Okay. So there's some controls on the project request side that we wouldn't find on the opportunity. That's more, again, you guys doing the opportunity bit. Okay. All right. Okay, so we're now to the point where I've got my project somewhat started up. I think you would agree with that, right? So I've got I either went through my project request form, I went through my opportunity and converted it, or I just simply said, I need a new project. No matter what, the end result is really that it's a project, right? So I'm not going to use that one. Here. Go ahead and use this one. Okay. And I'll go ahead and make this project live. Okay, go ahead and save that. What am I missing? Okay. So I forgot I had a custom field in there. Okay. So now that it's a project, okay, what is my workflow, right? So again, I've just converted it. Most people, again, probably the account manager or project manager is in control of this. Now, I may or may not have the estimate approved yet. If it came from sales, it's likely that I already have this estimate approved, right? But if I don't, again, I'm going to select on this. And again, we can start to develop that estimate. Now, if I come in here again, it's going to say what's in the schedule, and I can actually, this can be created by pulling from the schedule where it can fill in this work. But again, I'm just going to fill in what are the hours for each of my steps, who does it take, right? If I need to add in more, more services, I don't just need an art and creative director, I need a graphic designer and I need a proofreader. Don't need copy, but I need a proofreader. And again, then those services become available on my steps where I can, again, fill out the number of hours that they need, okay, that I think they'll need to come up with a value for that. Okay. Like I said, probably in the sales process, you've already done this. I would agree, right? Okay. And then again, getting the gross expenses in, again, what are the expenses that would be part of this? Again, on maybe on the design work, I need some printing or whatever that is. So again, I'm sorry, I'm just grabbing stuff. So don't think that's what you're doing. And then you're just putting in, how much would that typically cost us? And then putting in that would have a markup and getting in my gross. Okay. So again, this call isn't about actually doing the estimate per se. It's just more about that workflow of who's in charge. Okay. So on this. So now you can see that I do get an approval button on this, and this can be also controlled as part of your workflow. So if we're talking about the estimate, always on the estimate setting, we're going to have this internal approver. Okay. So how does this get set? Okay. By default, it's the project manager or account manager, sorry, on the project, kind of who created it. They're the ones who would be the approver on it. But we can better define that under admin system setup, account information, transaction preferences. We have an estimate setting, and that would be here. Who is my default approver on my estimate? So when an estimate is created, is it the AE on the project, right? Is it the PM on the project? Is it basically the person who created the estimate? Which typically, if I did the conversion, that's me. And so I would be able to open the estimate and approve it. Or do you have a centralized person that must review all these? So I create it, it comes in, right? I create the estimate, and then when I'm going to have to submit it, it would go off to that person approves, and we're good to go. Okay. So that's the way, again, so you can, in system setup, you can define who that goes to. Okay. But we can always come in. The default is this. And even as this is part of your workflow, is I have the estimate. I know I'm set as the approver, but maybe I'm doing something. I'm at a certain budget level that, I can't agree. I can't just approve this. So there's always going to be this way of, coming into the estimate settings and going ahead and changing it to the proper person. So again, maybe I'm changing it to here, and I save that. And now that's, the approve becomes a submit. So now this is going to go off to David. Now we don't have a routing of these of estimates. It's whoever's the approver, that's who the approver is. So if you do a routing workflow, just realize you'd have to come in and you have to know what is that routing. And they would just, the next person in line would say, okay, I'm David, I'm done, I'm done with it. I've done what I need to do it. So now I'm going to send it back to, again, James. James is our main person. And so now that's off to James, and I would just submit it as well. It started out in my bell for me to approve, but I know in our defined workflow, I need to make sure that I turn that over to somebody else. Okay. Yeah, we don't have an automatically workflow for the estimates. All right. Does that make sense? Okay. Now again, so whatever your workflow is, so we have that, the account manager is the one that creates it, can go ahead and approve it. That's fine. The account manager, it can automatically, when it's created, that it can go to a centralized person. Or again, you can set up a workflow where it's defined, hey, UAE, once you're done with it, you turn it over to them. And then that step two person knows, hey, once you're done with it, you turn it over to another person, right? But the ultimate goal is, of course, that somebody approves it. Okay. All right. So once that is approved, okay, and let me change this back to John. Okay. Okay. So that would be my estimate approval and those workflows. Are there any questions around that? Okay. Okay. No questions, just some statements. Routing approvals for estimates would be great. Yeah, I mean, again, we have that request in. Again, we just have to kind of see how many other people would that would be helpful for, and we can obviously put that in. If enough people ask for it, then of course we're going to look at putting that into the system. Okay. All right. So the next step that could actually come off of estimates would be the next kind of step would be I have these expenses, right? And so the next kind of workflow is how do I deal with these, right? So in the expense, once the estimate is approved, again, I can create a purchase order directly from the estimate itself. Now, this is kind of a does it work for your team or not? We're just saying it's an available feature that from the estimate you've already budgeted for it. It may even did quotes to get the quotes in. Okay. So you already know who the vendor is, for example. And so I'm just going to pick, big media, right? And so when I create the purchase order, it's already going to take that information and create that purchase order. Okay. So I don't have to do anything again. And then this approval, this isn't really routable per se. If you remember, for orders, it's always going to be based upon your employee record. So orders are always controlled by who can approve. It's just a matter of value on your employee record. Okay. I think most of you know that. I can quickly show that to you if you'd like. Uh, so admin employee record. I'm just going to pick Bryn here. And so if I go to the accounting side of purchasing, there's these order limits here, and that's what we're looking to. So who's ever order, again, do they have something in there? And so they can approve up to. If it's a penny more, they can't. It goes to the next level of people. Okay. There's also a control of it sends it to the next level. So you may have 4 levels. And so level 1 can't approve it, but it will only go to the level 2 people. So we have a setting that it will just send to that level 2 people. Otherwise, it goes to everybody 2 through 4. If I can't approve it, it's going to everybody 2 through 4. Make sense? Okay. Or I can do a little bit of a control. If I can't approve it, it's going to send it to the next available level that can, which may be level 2. It may be level 3. So I'll just totally skip the level 2 people and put it to the level 3 people. Okay. But the idea, of course, is right here it's saying anyone approved for the limit, but I can actually, because I'm my own approve, I have enough, I could approve this right away, but I could still turn it over to a specific person and submit it to them for approval. So normally, if I cannot approve it, the system is automatically saying anyone approved for the limit. But even with that, I can click in and decide who do I send it to. So again, here's another workflow for you guys to think about. Who do I send my orders to for final approval? Okay. So again, it's just a matter of does it just send it out? Somebody please approve it? Or do I actually pick a person? And a lot of this control is just from the employee record, just giving them an amount or not giving them an amount. And that is a control mechanism as well. All right. All right. So the next thing within a project, so that's kind of the order and what is the workflow for those, I need to, on the project, I get my purchase orders and create those. Now, again, I can do it through the estimate. I wanted to show you that part, but there's also, again, there's no harm in that your guys' workflow is just simply, I need an order. I may have budgeted for it, but I don't do it through the budget. I simply come to either here or, the media, depending on what you're buying, and just say a new purchase order from this project. Okay. I could also, from the project itself, just so I get a little flow in, you can see that I can say, I want something new. And it's kind of filling in a lot of it's filling in the project information for me. So again, I just pick my vendor, pick the item. And again, that's the same workflow, right? Once I've created it, who's going to approve it? Make sense? Okay. So we've got the project kind of rolling, right? I've got my things in play, right? I have my estimate in, that's been approved. I have any of my orders in, and those have been approved. Okay. There's one other, there's one more thing that we can put into the project that kind of defines as best have a defined workflow, and that is changes. Okay. So I'm working the project and suddenly either, maybe the budget got cut or the client is asking for a lot more, whatever that is. And we use what we call a project change request. Okay. So what is in a change request? So this one is a little bit different from your project request form because I'm already within the project. So the setup is a little bit different, although we kind of use that same kind of concept workflow, which is I'm going to define it. Okay. So what is it that you're asking for? Is it just a general request, or is it a copy change, or is it a spec change, right? Again, I can kind of define what these are. Am I changing project fields, or am I changing spec fields? Okay. I come into this, and what is this helping me to set up? It's basically I have questions that I can fill in just like we did on the spec sheets. If I have questions that need to be answered, and I can bring those into that request form. I think I put some on this one. Oh, maybe I haven't defined any. Okay. But the more important part of this is that I'm defining what's the approval process. Since this is a project related thing, okay, the approval process isn't to a person, it's to a service. So if that makes sense, right? I can put it to a person, but in general, what I'm doing is I'm saying, well, I can put it to a person, but for the most part, I'm saying, what service should do this? So whoever is the graphic designer, that's who I want to send it to. Whoever is the account manager, that's who I want to send it to. Does that make sense? Okay. We could also, I know some of you use our key people fields, okay? And this can be used with the key people as well. So whoever is the designated billing manager or the designated project manager, again, these are the other things that, again, this is kind of duplicating some of that, but maybe my designated copywriter, that's my lead copy for this project, I designate that in the key people field. And so this request form will go to that person, this change request. Okay. So that they work slightly different. I can send it to a person, but oftentimes it's being sent to the role. That's who I want to do it because I don't know who's going to be doing what on the project, but I know when I ask a particular type of change, it's going to be sent to the right person on that project. Okay. So now, well, how do I use this? Right. So within my project itself, so let's go back to the project we were kind of working on. Here we go, new startup. There is a location here, change request. And so I can only have one change request going at a time until this one's fully complete. I can't create another one. And that's because, again, we're either changing specs or we're changing custom fields within the project. And so until one is done, we can't do the other, right? So again, we kind of lock it down until that one's created. So the idea is that they would say, hey, I need a new change. What is it? And so again, I'm going to say specs. And so again, what's the subject? Need to do more, right? And again, just kind of, whatever it is, right? You're putting in all your information. If there were special questions in here, I would be answering those questions, okay? I say next. And this is, okay, what spec sheets did you want to change, right? This project didn't have any spec sheets, so it's actually allowing me to add new spec sheets. If I already had spec sheets, those spec sheets would be sitting here for me to add in. Okay. So again, I want to do a photography spec sheet, blah, 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 right? Putting that information in. It's telling me that it's new. So that's the idea. And I can add in as many as I want. If I edit them, that's the idea as well. So then I can go ahead and do the next. This is saying, do you, kind of confirming, do I have an attachment to do? What's been updated? And I go ahead and submit that. And again, that's going to go in and you can see that it's kind of locked down and sent to me. So that project request form is sitting here, or change request. I think, where's my change request? Nope. May have to refresh that. It's a little harder when it's you all the time, right? Okay. Oh, I missed that. I know it said it went to me. Okay. Let me hit the project again. Approval. Oh, okay. Forgot to get somebody in there. That's the problem. My mistake on that one. Okay, so let me just put myself in there. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, so here's the change request. So the idea is that person go into their bell, they're able to see what it is, and they can go ahead and approve it. And in this case, it was I'm adding new stuff to that spec sheet. Okay, that makes sense. So that gets approved. And within the project, again, I'm going to see it's kind of goes away as far as a change request. It's already done. But what I will see in this case, I added spec sheets as I see that this is sitting here. Okay. So now if I say a new one, so this one says this right here. So now I have a new one. I can say, okay, I need a new change request. And I'm going to go ahead and do the specs again. I'll probably have to fix it again. And I put that in and I say next. Again, that spec is already here, so I can go ahead and edit that spec. And in this case, I'm going to say, added some more, and I put some in talent and save, right? Okay, and then that gets sent out and submitted. Sorry, again, once it's sitting here, it's sent for approval. Do not pay attention to this. This would already be predefined, as you know. Sorry about that. Okay, just go ahead and pop it to me. Okay. I know I'm kind of racing through the approvals. Okay, so there we go. So the idea is that again, that goes through a workflow, and those changes are being tracked and seen. When I go look at the spec sheet, we can actually see that once that got approved, that we've actually versioned this, right? So it's version 2, and so this is what everybody sees because that's the latest version. But I can always go back and see what was it and what is it now, and actually what was changed in these, right? But again, it's that workflow of, okay, I need something to change. How do I kind of track that? Right. So if I create a change request, that's that tracking. Who does it get sent to? Who does it get sent for approval? And then fix that way. Once it's approved, then again, that goes into effect. Again, the change request will just affect spec sheets or custom fields in the project, but I can still pass a bunch of information. Hey, I need a bunch more stuff on here. And so then it may cause me to reading this request form, right? The change request and going through that may force me to go ahead and create a brand new change order, right? So I need more budget, less budget, whatever that is. And I can go ahead and create a change order estimate. That also goes through its normal routing. Okay. I think you agree with that. All right. Okay. And there we go. So again, I haven't gone into like the billing workflows and those those types of things. Again, I wanted to kind of keep it a little bit more on the project level. Okay. So just to recap, we have how do I bring the project in, that type of workflow manual, just create a project through a sales opportunity and working on that pseudo opti project, converting that into a real project. Okay. I have project requests, which can then, again, that goes through an approval process and I create a project or campaign at the end. Okay. While I'm in the project, I have my estimate. I can then route that estimate. I have purchase orders, right, that can go through that routing. Vendor invoices, if that's the way you track as well. Again, once the vendor invoice is tracked as well, sorry, I can actually show you that. Vendor invoices as well, if you want who is the approver on those. Again, that's another way of doing it. It can technically be if you have a one-to-one vendor invoice, it could be the AE on the project header or the PM on the project header or sorry, on that invoice header, right, for the project. We can't split it. If you have a vendor invoice for multiple projects, this is not going to work. It's who's ever on the header of that invoice, that project, then that's who it is. If it's blank, then it's just going to be the person who entered. Okay. Or I can pick a specific person for it to go to. Okay. So even on the vendor invoice side, where you can kind of route things. But again, this isn't for routing and approval of that. This is more again, just to show you how you can guys set up workflows to better help your agency to kind of get keep track of things and make sure they're there. Okay. All right. So then also within the project, once I'm working on it and I need changes, again, I can put in these change requests, which again has a certain workflow to them that you define and to better who does this need to go to, who gets the approval. Once it's approved, then again, that last person is probably going to be now the account manager or project manager can then review those and you know, change things as needed, right? If it's already that, you know, do I need a new estimate? Do I need new orders out there? Do I need to assign more people, take people away, whatever that is? Okay. All right. Um, and that is kind of where I was at. I know this was kind of a high level kind of uh, webinar. Let me see if there is there. So, a few questions here. Is there a way to automatically route project requests based on sales territories? Again, we route them to people. Okay. Now, that's a great question. So, what do I do when I need to send it? So, oftentimes, what we see is okay, the project request forms themselves were designed that it goes to a person, and then that person can decide who to send it to next. And then that person can decide to who to send it to next. So it's kind of this, they kind of didn't have a predefined routing. They just simply, that person knows who to give it to next. Okay. We can predefine the route, but again, we make it very flexible. So I can show you, again, I have that project request, sorry, wrong one, my project request. So sorry, here's my project request. I have that open. And so again, if I need to send it, I'm going to send it to a central person that would control that region. Perhaps that's what you're going to do. So you may have each territory. This one says, automatically route to a sales territory. So I would have probably a person that's in charge of that territory, if that makes sense, is the starting point. And so it goes to them. And then once it comes into their bell, then they're going to come in and go, okay, now I need to send it to somebody else, right? And they know who that goes to. Now, if you have a defined route, then I'm just setting up two request forms, one per territory, right? So this is their territory. I make it available to that territory. So in there we go, under tracking and project request. Again, part of the control of who can see this is right here, right? So this may take a little bit. I can also, that says security group, but I can also put it to people. So I've seen this as well, where I have, for example, in yours, territory. Territory 1 project request. Who are the people that have access to this? The people in Territory 1. Territory 2 project request. Who has access to create a new one? People from Territory 2. Now, again, if you have people, the territories are separate, but then when it goes to a project manager, that may be different team. Then again, I may again add other security groups in, so those other people from kind of there is no territory for them, then they would see it. So like the project managers may control a couple of different territories. I may put their name, but I may just put the security group. Make sense? All right. On change order estimates, do you only add the new items to do, or do you delete the old ones first? Great question on the change orders. Change orders are to track the change. So in that change order, let's see, let me get to an estimate here. And here we go, the money. Okay. So in the change order, typically what we would do is put in the negative. So again, if something went down, whatever that was, I would put the negative value. So if in step one, in the original, I said I needed X number of art creative design, and I said 5. In this one, I may say -2, right? And so I'm taking away 2 hours, right? If I need to add more, I had 5 before and I need 7. So I'm just going to put the +2 hours here. I don't take out all of the old one. I just put in the new. Okay. Now we do have that feature when I create a brand new estimate. Okay. Let me do this, right? So if I have in my schedule, and let's say, for example, because I may already have that approved, and I'm just going to put in a service here, okay, and put in some allocated hours, okay. My original estimate that's been approved, right? This one right here, as you can see, it has, on my labor, it has 2 hours here, right, on this one, and nothing for graphic design. So let's go back to the schedule again, sorry. So on this one, I say 5 for that, right, for graphic design. This makes sense? So then when I come back into here and I say, I need a new estimate, and I call it a change order, pull from schedule, okay? It's going to mess up a couple of things, but when I pull this in, you see that it's already got this. That makes sense? So since my new one, I changed it from 7 to 5, it recognizes that and it says I need to remove these hours from it. Make sense? So that's a quick way to kind of get those changes. If you put it in the schedule and pull the change order, it's going to do that negative. So again, we're the change order is the differences. You don't want to delete the old one because that's record. You're just doing the differences. Okay. Okay. Then the question comes up, well, if we restrict it to have only one estimate per project, how would I do that? Okay. Yeah, I can't have a change order if you're restricting it. So then you're saying, well, now I have to version it. So you're unapproving that estimate, making changes, and then resubmitting it, resending it to the client to get sign off on it. So that's the difference, right? So again, why is it that you only have the one estimate? I get it. But again, you may rethink that and say, well, if we have a lot of changes, maybe we should allow the change orders so that we can just say, hey, can you sign off on these changes so I'm not having to sign off on the entire budget? Okay. Okay. As far as a rejected change request, um, that just kind of flows through the same way. It goes back to the original person that I don't have any change requests. Okay, I approved it. So that change request just basically goes back to the person, and they can do whatever they want, and they can submit it again, or they can delete it. That's really what it's about. So when it's rejected, it just goes back to the person that created it. And for them to, it doesn't really look that different other than it says, hey, you were rejected. It sits in their belt. Okay. And okay, if you want, I guess I could show that. So let me go in the wrong spot there. Okay. So again, I have a change request. I'm going to go ahead and do the specs. Okay, and it shows me that it's revised. As you can see, that gets submitted. Sorry again. Once again, I'm coming back into here so I can set up the approver. Sorry, I didn't have this predefined. Um, okay, so that's sitting in my bell. And so here's my change request. I'm going to go ahead and select it. And I say resubmit. Reason. Okay, and save that. Okay, so that's been rejected. In the project, I'm going to say, see that it's resubmitted. If I'm not mistaken, I get it in here. There's my change request. See, rejected item. It's back in my bell. And so then I'm opening it up and seeing, okay, what's it asking me to do? I can see that we're working on version 3. Uh, in the approval process, again, I get to see, oh, here's what his comments were. No, do this again. Okay. So then I come into my spec and again, all right, nothing was saved. So again, I'm adding more to it or whatever. And then I can and it just says resend. So not much of a difference. And then if that gets approved, then again, those approval, I just quickly approved it. And then so back in here, those spec sheets again have been updated and it's going to show me that it's version 3. And again, I can see what were the changes. What was it originally? What were the changes? If I was new to this, I logged in as somebody else, this would say revised. It would let me know that there's something that changed in here. Okay. Okay. Would the client or the project manager be filling out the change request? Great question. Who would? Is it the copywriter asking for the change? Is it the PM sending it to the account manager? Is it, could the client do this? Yeah, but right. Do you involve your clients that deeply into your projects? All right. That's the question, right? Um, because again, you're changing specs. You usually don't want the clients changing your specs, right? They can tell you about it, if that makes sense. Okay. But up to you. Again, could you? Yes. All right. All right. Are there any other questions? I think I got to all of them. It's the territories. Okay. So again, I know this was very high level. I just wanted you to think of what are our workflows for getting that project started up. And also a little bit of when we're in the project is created, what is our workflow for to deal with the estimate? What is our workflow for the orders? What is our workflow perhaps for the vendor invoices? If there's changes to specs, what is our workflow for that? Okay. And that's why I said we do have tools to track that. I have something that needs to change. Let's document it. Let's send it around to make sure everybody's on board. If they are, make the change, right? And then that becomes the new set of specs. Like I said, there's not that connection to budget, right? Oh, I need to change the budget. Can it automatically create budget? No, we don't do that because again, that's numbers. What am I going to change? That gets very intricate and probably takes somebody setting down and making those decisions as opposed to letting the system just blast it in. So that's the nature. We kind of stop at the spec. That should probably drive you to say, oh, I need less or more work, so I need to change my budget for more or less, using the change orders to track those differences. Okay. All right. Well, let me, again, last chance for questions here. All right. Well, thank you very much for attending. I appreciate that. See you in future webinars. If you find this helpful, again, there's a short survey at the tail end of this to say, what is it that you guys would like to see in the future? And we'll go over them. Thank you again and have a great rest of the day. Appreciate it.